Well, I'd love to know a bit more about reading aloud and why that's a good idea. I was speaking to someone recently. You know, if you ever say to someone, you hear people say, I read this book. Well, I mean, I listened to it on Audible, and there's kind of like a shame there.
Yeah.
But my friend, who's an educator and classically trained, a wonderful fella who's critical of every school system imaginable, somehow thinks that it's actually more natural to listen than to read. Like that's how we grew up. That's how we grew up listening to stories.
Storytelling was passed on as oral storytelling for generations before we ever wrote it down. Yeah. It's interesting too, because we do have a tendency to prioritize or value more reading with your eyes. But really you're just changing the mode. Now you're reading with your ears. There's some interesting things that happen with reading aloud or audiobooks that don't happen when you're reading with your eyes.
Let's do it.
One of them is that good readers, especially the better you get at reading, the faster you are. So a lot of times we'll skip like connector words. So if I was to hand you like the first page of The Hobbit and you were to read it silently to yourself, you would be able to read it much faster than if you were reading it out loud or if I was reading it out loud to you, right? And that's because you're skipping all those little connector words, which is fine. That's how we read with our eyes. And they can see this with the way that our eyes, like how they scan words. What happens when we're listening is that every single word, all of those grammatically correct, sophisticated language patterns are being stored in our brain. It is the only time that happens. We don't speak in grammatically correct, sophisticated language. We don't see it in movies, in media, talking to our friends, talking with our parents. We're not doing it right now, right? We're not speaking in grammatically correct, sophisticated language patterns. The only place this happens.
Unless you're Jordan Peterson, who seems to speak like a book, but that's about it. Yeah.
Yeah. So the only place we get it is from not just books, but listening to books. And so, and for a lot of kids and adults, I'm one of them. I retain better through audio than I do with my eyes.
Cameron's the same.
Is that right?
I hate audiobooks because my mind drifts.
Yes.
Almost immediately.
Yes.
And then I'm like, oh my gosh, it's been 5.5 minutes. I don't even know where to scroll back to.
Yes.
Whereas if I'm reading a book, I can pretty much figure out on the page where I'm at. I like to put the sentences, the back and forth between the characters. I like to emphasize what I want to emphasize. I enjoy that.
Yeah.
But you shock me, though, how much my wife is able to listen and absorb a book without any effort. So we'll go on a big road trip, like an 8-hour road trip, and she'll listen to an entire book on like double, triple speed.
Oh, can you do it on fast speed? Okay.
I'm horrified.
It helps my ADD to keep it in double time.
Oh, that makes sense. Yeah. I can't listen to it in double time, but I do prefer to listen. Although I will say, like, if I'm listening to a book and I'm like, oh, I need to write that down, especially a nonfiction book that I'm like, oh, I wanted to write that down or something, I'll oftentimes get it in print too, so that I can look at it and see it in a different way. But for our kids, there's a lot to be gained in some ways. So in our homeschool, we actually prioritize and value reading aloud over independent reading.
Okay.
Especially because we can do it now, and then we have storing all this good language in their brain, and then they'll carry that on with them.
That's wonderful.
Yeah.
We've read books to our kids. Like I've read The Lord of the Rings to the kids, and I've read The Hobbit. But honestly, now we read Brother Grimm's fairy tales because it's like, okay, just like start, finish.
Oh yeah.
And then we'll read another one and another one. Yeah. And I think we enjoy that. I really like that. My job is to read. My wife's job is to tell everyone to shut up when they start talking. Because
color.
Yeah. Which is a good point, actually, that for a lot of kids, they actually listen better if they're doing something with their hands. Yeah. My kids are always doing something with their hands, or my oldest son, he would be like jumping on the trampoline. And I would think there is no way this kid is hearing anything I'm reading. Then the next day I'd say, who remembers what happened? And my girls that were sitting very prim and proper might just sit there like, and then he'd be like, well, and he'd give you like the rundown. I'm like, I guess you were paying attention. That's kind of amazing. Yeah. So giving them something with their hands can help, because I think sometimes we have this picture in our mind that reading aloud our kids, I mean, I know I had this. I'll be like sitting there reading, I don't know, like a Heidi or something, and my children would all be sitting around. I don't know, expecting them to whittle or something like in my head, like, or crochet. I don't know. They don't do that. In general, like they're sitting on the couch and it's like, he touched me with his toe. And I'm telling kids like, that is your cushion. Do not take your no limbs off the cushion, right? Someone has to run off and use the bathroom and the doorbell rings and it's just messy.
You know what it reminds me of is, when you watch a movie when you were younger, maybe with an annoying friend, it's like, oh, watch this bit. And they really need, and you're like, oh, I was going to watch this bit, but now I don't know. I'm like that when I read. I'm like, everyone shut up and pay attention.
Yeah,
This
yeah,
is
yeah.
gold that you guys are hearing. Gold.
It just happened like last week where I was reading aloud and I did not think my twins, who are always wrestling all the time, like a couple of puppies that are just rolling around on the ground, I did not think they were listening at all. And I was like, what did she just say? And then one of them looks up, gives me the line, word perfect. And I'm like, my husband just started laughing. He's in the other room. And I'm like, okay, fine. I guess I can't die on that hill because there's no hill to die on. Fine.
Well, I'd love your advice on how we parents can begin reading to our children. I mean, I think short stories or fairy tales are the best way to kind of dip your foot in. Like we'll get the kids jobs. So like Kiara, our daughter, will light the candles and people do different things. And it's easy. Like you don't feel like a failure. Like if you've never read to your kids before and now you want to read The Lord of the Rings.
You don't start there.
These are very long chapters, The Lord of the Rings. I mean, they take like 40 minutes to read.
Like thinking about The Hobbit, like all the different voices. I remember the first time I tried to read this aloud and the voice I did for Gollum, I was like, we're not gonna be able to keep that up very long, are we? That's not gonna work.
Just bring this one back down to normal.
I think short books are a really good way to go. And also realizing there's something, we kind of do this as parents where we think picture books are for little kids. And then as they get older, they should, like there's more value in novels or longer books. And it's very interesting because a couple of things about that. One is that a picture book or a shorter story has the whole story arc. Like every story, most stories are like about a hero who has to overcome obstacles, and to become who they need to be changed, right? Like that's the story of any book. Like whether you're talking about The Hobbit or Little House on the Prairie or actually any story. So we can even talk about like a football game. We're talking about like a hero who has to overcome obstacles to get what they want or need, right? That's what a story structure is. A picture book has all the elements of a story, of a full story arc, just like a novel does. Also, because publishers are expecting that novels and chapter books are most often read by students themselves. They tend to assign like reading levels, for example. They don't want, if your child's going to read Ramona the Pest by Beverly Cleary, for example, they expect like a third, fourth grader, is going to be reading that. So they need to make sure it's at about that reading level. So they simplify the language and the syntax because of that. That doesn't happen with picture books. Picture books don't have a reading level because they expect parents are reading these aloud or teachers are reading these aloud. So what happens is we often see the language actually degrade just a little bit when you go from a picture book to a novel. So often we think, my kids are getting too old for this. I need to read something longer without pictures. No, you don't. You can, but you don't need to. You can stay with shorter stories, picture books for longer.
Hey, thank you so much for watching. Before you go, do us a favor, leave a comment, let us know what you thought of the video, like, and subscribe.